Hey there guys, Noah here, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded much of anything, and it's honestly because I'm working on a massive project, but in the meantime, until that video is released, I figured I'd go and start making actual content again because I've been gone for over a month. So we're back, and today we are doing a tier list of every single Overtrigger currently available in the English format. I'm going to be honest, there are quite a few of them, especially the collabs that I have no idea, like, as in terms of, like, overall consistency and, like, how I'll personally feel about them. But how this is going to work is, because you know what, let me go ahead and get rid of this tier here. I'm going to delete a row. Primarily because usually how I'm going to go about this is, if you are being consistently used in a plentiful decks, you go in S tier. If you have some sort of viability in most of decks in whatever nation you're in, you go in here. If you've got some application, then great, you go in B tier. And then anything else that just does not help it at all goes here. So, under normal circumstances. And I will be taking premium into consideration as well. But without further ado, let's begin. And I'm going to start, of course, with the vanilla Overtrigger. And I'm gonna be honest, it has some implications, but nowadays probably not. And the reason for this is that there are just so many better options as in terms of what kind of Overtrigger you can put in. Because the idea is like, sure, double 100 million, like, that's great, but Brand Gate OT also exists and does practically the exact same thing without having this weird stipulation. I think the idea of having two separate units of 100 million is interesting, but rarely does it come up unless the deck really can get away with using it. The situation just never really calls for it, so I think it just goes there. Up next, let's do, speaking of Brand Gate, I think this is easily the best Overtrigger still. I know some people would be, you know, pretentious and say drag Vader, which I'll talk about in a moment, but honestly, this thing is just being overall consistent. Like, anyone who sits there and says, you know, they'll play a different Overtrigger over a Brand Gate OT in a Brand Gate deck is kind of crazy. Unless you're something like black, and even then, like, okay, sure, whatever. But in general, just any single Brand Gate deck wants to use this because the idea of doubling the power and critical of all your units in your front row is just universally good. And I never see a case for why it isn't that good, why you wouldn't run this. Even in premium, I feel like that every single clan will run it just because they know they can get away with it and because of how universally good it is. In Link Joker's case, it's like, okay, I just make my columns even more annoying to guard against. Have fun. DP, they're already hitting ridiculous numbers, so a little less relevant in there, but especially in Novas when you have like 3 to 4 Excel markers in one move, like hitting this on a drive check is insane. So that's kind of the reason why I'm just gonna put it there. Like, and pretty much that kind of logic can be applied to literally any standard deck that uses the Brand Gate OT. So I'm just gonna leave it there. I know people are gonna get mad at me in the comment section, but that's just how it is. And then we have Drag Vader, which I think goes hand in hand, and these are kind of interchangeable. Drag Vader has gotten hit a whopping 2 times, if I'm not mistaken. First with Shiranui, and then now recently with Buff Sakura. So, like, yeah. If that ain't a clear indication this Overtrigger is broken just because of how many restrictions it already has, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, it makes Dragon Empire decks very consistent, at least, and makes them really annoying to deal with. Especially when they're having multi-attacks out the wazoo, and then you drive check this, and it's like, oh, well, this sucks. So, yeah, no, just overall, these two are kind of interchangeable as in terms of just their, you know, how useful they are. That's why I believe they go in S tier. They're just that good. They're that consistent. I wish I could say this thing about the Keter OT. I'm going to put it down. I don't think it's useless. I mean, there's probably at least 1 or 2 decks that would consider using the Keter OT, but, like, those are so far few in between where technically you can make the argument, yeah, like, it's still better than vanilla by most accounts, but it's probably on the lower end and the lower spectrum of it, just because I think a Martinoa has had implications like way back when, but the problem with a Martinoa is like, would you want more drive checks, or would you want literally anything else? And we're going to talk about it when we get to the Cray Elemental Overtriggers, but like, I think in general, like, Martanoa gets kind of outdone by a lot of just the generic Overtriggers that you can get from like the festival collections and whatnot. So, I mean, it's still better than vanilla, but like not by much, right? And that's kind of the big if, because, you know, again, I think it is a bit more situational than a lot of the other, you know, Overtriggers in the game. So I'm just gonna leave it there for now. I may bump it down depending on how the rest of this tier list plays out. Dark States OT, I think you'll go here. And the reason why I say it is because there are a lot of Dark States decks which much rather use other Overtriggers over it. However, there are a lot of instances where you can kind of get away with running the Dark States OT, just simply because like just plus 10 in a crit permanently on your Vanguard for the whole rest of the game is actually really valuable, especially with decks that get multiple Vanguard swings as well, like Chrono Jet, for example. So like there are some niche applications with it, and it's at least more useful, I find personally, over a Martanoa any day. So that's why it's going there. I don't think it's the worst Overtrigger imaginable, but you know, so like much like, because there's going to be one particular Overtrigger that kind of outclasses it in almost every way, and I'll get to it in a moment, but like, yeah, it has its uses, but it very much depends on the deck. Up next, Stokea. I think Stokea is honestly a really good Overtrigger. I know some people will probably sit there and be like, it's just an Omni trigger, it's not that big of a deal, but sometimes you don't need that flashy of an effect. This is just universally good in a lot of Stokea decks. Like, if you ask them, okay, what would I rather have? A really wonky effect that may or may not work in my deck, or something that's just universally consistent. And I think that's really the big thing with Blessed Favor, is it is super consistent regardless of the deck you actually play. The only caveat is that sometimes it just doesn't do enough to just outright ruin your opponent's day. And this is still somewhat guardable, assuming your opponent plays into it properly. Like, Blessed Favor is annoying, especially if they are able to heal down off the effect, and it's just like, okay, well, that really is just unfortunate, but I mean, it could be a lot worse, you know, and you could be a Martanoa, like, you could beat the regular one, like, that's really the big thing, right? So, I think it goes there. I don't think it's that bad. I genuinely believe it's not that bad, so I think it's probably one of the better Overtriggers just simply because of its versatility. Like, there are a lot of decks that are going to want to use it, so you know what? Might as well, you know. Multi-attack decks, Vanguard-centric decks, drop zone recursion decks, a lot of them will use this just simply because, you know what? I like having multiple different trigger effects going off at once. I like having that little bit of advantage without having to overthink it. So that's why I think Blessed Favor goes there. Lyrical. Oof. Lyrical is a tough one. Because if this was before a lot of the newer ones have come out, I would almost say definitely A tier. And I think it very much depends on the deck. So for now, I'm going to put it in B tier. And the reason for this is very simple. There are a lot of Lyrical decks that much rather use a more generic Overtrigger over it. Like, yes, 10k to all of your rear guards is just universally good. It's very similar to the Dark States OT in the sense where if you drive check it, and especially if you drive check it early, it's very good. But if you don't see it at any point toward like the late game, then it kind of becomes just mid in a sense. It's one of those Overtriggers you have to see at the right condition, and I think that's really the big difference maker between B tier and C tier, is that if you find the right situation to hit it, it can be useful, versus A tier, which is just universally good, but not absolutely broken to make the deck that busted, if that makes any sense. So I think it goes there. I think it's a solid Overtrigger, but it has its faults. If you drive check this late game when it really doesn't matter, it just kind of feels bad. But regardless, it is still a good Overtrigger. So I'm just going to leave it there. Yeah. Up next, let's go ahead and do Valnoot. I think Valnoot is one of the best Overtriggers, bar none. It's not S tier. I genuinely believe it is not S tier. And that is simply because the decks that do want to utilize this will utilize it well. Stuff that get basically any deck that has a standing rearguard after the Vanguard swings, or during like that initial like drive check where you like, in the case for something like, let's say like Luard for example, where they'll swing Van activate effect to call something, and then that's a standing unit, and you drive check this, like you create an additional attack and 2 attacks that have 100 million power. Like, this single-handedly does what the vanilla Overtrigger wants to do, but better. And in the worst-case scenario, when you don't have a standing rearguard, you still get an additional effect regardless, where you get to draw 1 and call 1 and give it +10. So that's just universally good. Like, worst-case scenario, if you drive check it in the most awkward way, okay, whatever, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But even if you, like, don't see it in the right, like, timing, you at least have something. And I think that really is a massive difference maker in comparison to a lot of the B-tier Overtriggers. So I think Valnoot definitely goes there. Oh my god, this one is so stupid. Blue OT, peak. Alright, I still don't own one, and I'm mad because, oh god, this one is insane. Literally, this was the primary reason why a lot of decks just don't use their generic, like their clan or nation specific Overtrigger, period. And just because of the recursion and the crit pressure, it's so good. It is such a simple effect, much like Valnoot, except not as specific. Because worst comes to worst, it's like, oh, I just drove check it at the most random time that doesn't really help me. Well, look on the bright side. I at least get to add a card from drop back to hand. So if it's a combo piece, if it's more shield, whatever, great. I at least have it. And that's something universally good. That's why I feel like that's why this doesn't really come up. Most Dark States decks will much rather run Blue OT than their generic, like, Dark States OT, if that makes any sense. And in Premium, this is more commonplace, just simply because this card is so good at recurring shit. Like, it is absolutely insane how useful this Overtrigger is. So, definitely it goes there. I think it's S tier. I know people will get mad at me in the comment section, but, whatever. Alright, this one, Purple OT. Ooh. This one's tough, because I want to put it in S tier, but I think we'd have too many S tiers. So you know what? I'm going to bump this down to A tier right next to Valnoot, and I'm going to put this in S tier. And at least this, regardless of when you check it, it's just that good. Because if you drive check it on a turn, regardless if you're at a certain amount of damage or not, you get to heal. And then you call 1. So you not only heal 1, but you combo extend off of 1 Overtrigger. So it's basically what Blessed Favor and Valnoot want to do, but 100 times better. Like, I'm not even exaggerating when I say that. I think a lot of people slept on this OT for no fucking reason when it was first revealed. And then it suddenly turned into one of the just most generically good Overtriggers. And it's probably the best generic Overtrigger we have in the format, where regardless of when you use it and whenever you drive check it, it's just going to be so beneficial to you. Because worst comes to worst, you call 1 and you give it 100 million. Or you heal 1 and then you call. And then you give power. And that's just insane. So not only does it create an extra attack, but it heals you. And that's, I mean, you can't compete with that. I think that's just the reason why Blessed Favor is down here and not up here. So, yeah. Purple OT, very good. And then we get to, I'm not sure if this is white or yellow. I keep seeing very mixed, like, things on it, but I think it's going to go down here. And the reason for this is, it is so situational. It is 100% situational. And I would say it's at least better than, you know, Lyrical and Dark States, primarily because, worst comes to worst, you blow up your opponent's field. A board nuke is surprisingly good in this format. And especially in certain formats like Lyrical Cup, for example, this even gets even better, primarily because by the time that you drive check this, your opponent's not going to realistically have a board, so you'll end up drawing a crap ton off of this 1 Overtrigger. So, in theory, if you've got a pretty large board to work with, and you sit there and you go, oh, drive check, blow them up, bye. Or in the more obvious like scenario in that situation, it's like, oh, you have an empty board? I pot a greed. And then I draw another one because you have nothing on your board. That's amazing. Also the fact that in very specific situations where you'll like OT to pass, and then it's like, oh, yeah, about that, retire all your guardians, because I could just do that, and then I'll still give the 100 million to my rear guard. Have fun. Like, that's actually insane. I think this Overtrigger is very much slept on, but I also understand that it is very situational. That's why it's going to go there. And now I actually have to pay attention. Because a lot of these I don't know going forward. I'm kind of just going to go off of deck log and just kind of rate them based off of how good I believe the effect is. But I would rather get some more context. So if you know how these Overtriggers kind of play into each other, let me know in the comment section so that way I just know, right? Alright, so up first we got Cororo Comic. This one does the additional effect, perform one of the following. Choose one of your units, gets +1 critical at end of turn. Or choose one of your standing rear guards and it gets auto at the end of battle. This unit attacks, stand this unit to end of turn. So it is a combination between Valnoot and the blue OT. And I think that's pretty good for a overall just generic Overtrigger for Cororo. I think it's actually really good. It doesn't need to be too flashy. It is literally if these two Overtriggers, you know, use polymerization, and that's what you get with Cororo. So I think it's just universally good, right? And I think that's really the big difference maker in comparison to a lot of the other ones. But yeah, I think that one's pretty good. I genuinely think, like, I have no context, but I mean, shit, it's gotta be worth something, right? So it's gonna go there. All right, up next we got one of the token Ramboo ones. So this one says, additional effect, perform one of the following. Choose one of your vanguards, gets +1 crit and drive until end of turn. Or choose one of your rear guards until end of turn. That unit performs drive checks and gets critical +1. Ooh, that sounds really nasty. Because it's much like the Cororo one, except I would say arguably slightly more dangerous depending on the circumstances on your board state too. Ooh, this is a tough one. But here's my major problem with this, okay? And I know this may seem a bit awkward, because I know I just talked a good thing about the Cororo one, where it's like, oh, one of your units gets a critical, or, you know, that. This is very similar to it, except I think this one is slightly better. This is a hot take, I think this is slightly better than the Cororo one. Because in the weird instance where you're like, okay, choose one of your vanguards, it gets a crit and an extra drive. And mind you, if that's your second check, possibly third, I don't know if they get triple drive, you get an additional drive check. That's pretty good, right? And that's really, ooh, that's nutty. And then, let's say you want to give it to your rear guard and do the rear guard effect. Oh, guess what? I give 100 million to that rear guard, and it can perform drive checks and gets a critical. So, yeah, it's pretty much, if you combined, I'm pretty sure that this kind of feels like if a Martinoa got an upgrade. Like, this is what I feel like the Keter Overtrigger should have been, right? So I think it just definitely goes there. I think it's solid, but you know what? We're just going to leave it like that. I think that's probably where I personally rate it. All right, up next, we've got Overstrike. Additional effect. If your Vanguard is in Overstrike state, or turn of whatever the hell it's called, retire all your opponent's rear guards. I think this goes down here. It's probably pretty bad. I would say probably one of the worst ones I've read. And that's simply because this one I think Yellow OT outclasses it in almost every single way. Like, enough said, right? And I know this is a relatively, like, older one, like, from, like, back in Overdress era, so the effect is not that crazy, but still, I think it just goes there. Ragnarok. Additional effect. All of your front row men and Valkyrie units get +10 until end of turn. And then choose one of your rear guards and stand it. Not the worst, but we have better. We definitely have better. Like, that's not even up for debate. I'm sorry. Get mad at me if you want, but we definitely 100% have better. Alright, up next we got Hitsatu. I think that's how you pronounce it. Alright, this one, okay, this is a weird one. Alright, additional effect. All of your units get +1 critical. And then play effect, which I guess you can use it as an order card, I guess. Choose one of your vanguards gets +1 critical, and if your damage level has 5 or more cards, all your units get +10. Okay, so this is just generically good for token Ramboo. Okay. Ooh, that's interesting. I think it's situational, but the fact that you get, like, because unlike every other Overtrigger on this list, you at least have an ability to use it if you draw into it, right? If you just all happen to mulligan into it, you can at least activate it. And I think that's I think that gives it an advantage that a lot of the other, you know, Overtriggers just simply don't have. Like, if literally these two down here had a play effect similar to this, then it would actually be worthwhile. But as it is, those don't, and this one does. And to be honest, I have no context, but I'm going to assume it does, you know, something to help out. It gives you some sort of advantage. I think... This is tough. I don't know if I want to put it... I think I'm going to leave it in... I'm going to put it right next to the yellow OT. Because I think just having that additional, like, ability to be used... I kind of wished all Overtriggers had that, funnily enough. Because worst comes to worst, it's like, oh, I have... It doesn't need to be a broken effect either. Like, yeah, it's annoying, but it's a once per game kind of scenario. So, honestly, not bad. Could be a lot worse, you know? And then that's kind of my take with it. And then finally, we get the Bang Dream. Oof. I don't know how to rank this one. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just don't know how to rank this one at all. Choose 5 normal units from your drop with the same race as your Vanguard and different carnates and put them into your hand. So this potentially pluses 5 when you get this. I think... Damn. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's kind of mid. Like, at least in Martinoa, you get drive checks. At least, you know, this, you get... At least with these other ones, you get some sort of, like, actual benefit. This could potentially just brick. So you know what? Hot take. This goes down here. But slightly more useful than this one. So, yeah, I think that's the list. So, up top in S tier, we've got Elder Breath, Drag Vader, and Purple OT. And A tier, we've got Valnoot, Blue OT, the second token Ramboo, Cororo, and Bless Favor. Then in B tier, we've got Yellow OT, first one, the play order version, Lyrical, Dark States, and then Martinoa. And then we've got the collabs and the vanilla all the way down in C tier. But I will say, this was kind of surprising to look at. And I know there are a couple other Overtriggers from the Japanese format, like Monster Strike and whatnot, and even the Buddy Fight set that's going to be coming out in English pretty soon. And I don't know where I'd personally rank those, but if you've got an idea of where you would actually rank them on this tier list, let me know in the comment section. I would like your input. But until next time, this is Noah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye, everyone.